Hi, this is Svetlana, and we're starting our webinar overview of webinars on Agile Team Facilitation. Before we go to the content, please, if you hear me, write +1 to make sure that there is no problems with the sound. +1 are coming, so great. Thank you. If there are any problems with the sound, please write it to the chat window during the webinar. My name is Svetlana and I work at Agile Luxoft Practice. I do Agile project transformations and career coaching. Our today's webinar is the final webinar in the series of webinars on Agile Team Facilitation training. And the agenda for the current webinar is the following. First of all, we will look through the model techniques and frameworks that we already studied during the webinars. Also, I will share with you templates for meeting designs, and summarizing matrix of facilitation techniques will be also provided. We will also look through the learning objectives that we covered already during the series of webinars that we had, and we will also investigate the learning objectives that you will need to cover in face-to-face Agile Team Facilitation training in order to get the certificate for Agile Team Facilitation training. So part of the learning objectives can be studied during webinars and part should be studied during face-to-face training. Also, I will provide you the information about recordings of the previous webinars and announcement of upcoming webinars. By the way, if you would like to get timely announcements of upcoming webinars, please follow me on LinkedIn. I will always write announcements over there, and if you're following me, you can get it in time. Also, the announcements of upcoming webinars are sent by our Luxoft Training Center via email to all Luxoft employees. There will be also a question answering session as usual, but if you will have any questions during the webinar, please go ahead, write it to chat, and if we have time, I will answer it during the webinar. If no, then I will answer it you personally by email. Also, I will provide some materials for further reading and watching. So, the first topic of our webinar is overview of model techniques and frameworks from the previous webinars. We will look through the techniques that we already studied, but very high levelly, because there is no time to go through all the 6 webinars content in details. So, the first webinar was about Agile Team Facilitator Mindset. The title of the webinar is written over here on the slide. So if you would like to have a recording of this first webinar, you go to this link and there is a recording of this webinar and there is also a presentation of this webinar if you follow this link. Probably LinkedIn can be banned within Luxoft network, so you can do it from your home. Why I'm providing LinkedIn? Because there are also people from non-Luxoft on our webinars, and then they also should have a possibility to see these webinars. Some questions are coming, let me see. Some people don't see the screen. Could you please, if you see the screen well, write me +1. If you see that now I am showing you the models, the diagrams. Thank you. Thank you. I see that lots of people see the screen, so probably it is a local problem that the person should solve on his or her computer. Okay, we're going further. Thank you. So during this first webinar, we observed 7th leadership model. All the models are labeled. There are some markers how the model is called, so you can get the detailed information on this model either by listening the recording of the webinar or by Googling it. Dill's pyramid of neurological levels was also discussed during Agile Team Facilitation mindset, Facilitator mindset, as well as check-in, Met, Set, Glad, and position of facilitator. So here is the main content that was observed during the first webinar. You can use the presentation from the current webinar as the guidance, as the guideline for the previous webinars to make sure that you didn't miss anything, or if you would like to remind some of the models to you, so you can find it in what webinar it was provided using this current presentation. So during the second webinar on facilitation and facilitator stance, we discussed Johari window for self-awareness. We also discussed the facilitation and facilitator descriptions. Also, we talked about unbiased or biased state of Agile Facilitator. Probably as you remember that Agile Facilitator combines two roles, the facilitator and Agile gut principle, and that is why it is usually a bit biased. We can also learn room voting technique, how to vote very quickly in team using this technique. We also discussed the concept of being versus doing Agile. That doing Agile, you do it during your daily stand-ups, you do it during your planning, these exercises of Scrum events. But all the rest of time, you should be Agile. You should practice Agile principles and Agile values. And we also talked a bit about the facilitator stance. Should it act as a Superman, or should it be invisible and transparent person? And the actions of this person shouldn't be demanding and determining. The next webinar, the third webinar, which recording can be again found on this link, was about collaboration and meetings design. We talked about questions to sponsors that should be prepared before the meeting started. We also discussed the diagram, how the meeting should go. First you design the meeting, then you conduct, then you explore, evaluate information on the meeting, decide on some information, make decision making. Then you document the results, then you evaluate the results of the meeting. If necessary, you adapt it, evaluate again, and then again go to preparation, to meeting design, to conduction, and to documentation of the results. All these blocks are very important in order to prepare a good meeting for collaboration. Here you can also see the techniques for the exploration module phase of the meeting, for decision-making phase of the meeting, for evaluation. So these techniques you can use to evaluate, decide, or explore information. Here it is. Also during that webinar we discussed graphic facilitation, and I showed you a video on graphic facilitation, how you can easily learn how to draw simple elements to use it during the graphic facilitation process when you are drawing on a wall, when you are drawing on a board for your team. Also we talked about the meeting design templates, that there should be some beginning, for instance, as a warm-up, then should go a technique, for instance, for information exploration, then some technique for evaluation. As you see here we have evaluation block, and here is also evaluation block, and we use screening metrics for this. So when you design your meetings, you split it in blocks, and each block contains particular facilitation technique. Then we use, for decision making, we use consensus in this case, and also as a document we have action item list, where the information about what should be done, by whom it should be done, and when it should be done is provided. Also during the third webinar, we talked about organizing tools that help you to prepare your meeting, agenda and facilitator guide. It can be also used to provide more transparency and more purpose of the meeting. The fourth webinar was about conversations and decisions making. And here we discussed Cartesian coordinates technique for decision making. The details again can be found on this link. Procon list. It is a separate technique that can be used separately or can be used in combination with Cartesian coordinates technique. We also reviewed two feedback models, the coin model and the star model. Also, we investigated Walt Disney model for creative thinking and conversations. And we also explored gradients of consensus. When no, it is not always no, and yes, it is not always yes. So there are different no's and different yes. If you would like to get more information on some of these techniques, please follow this link and you can get the details over there. We can also had a webinar on Facilitation Context topic, and during this webinar we explored Drexler-Sibet team performance model, Spiral Dynamics by Claire Graves model. We shortly discussed Group Dynamics by Bruce Tuckman and Protecting Team Boundary model. There is no link to this recording of this webinar because it is not ready, but I will provide you it during this week. Telling the truth, we had a problem with the recording of this webinar, but I for sure will provide you the presentation to this webinar, and I will provide you the description, the detailed descriptions of these models. But we will try to resolve this issue with the recording of this particular webinar. It was, I think, the 5th webinar. So, the final webinar, the 6th webinar on this topic, was about facilitating chartering activities. It also doesn't have for now the link to recording because the recording is not prepared yet, but for this webinar we for sure have a recording and I will provide it to you soon. During this webinar we discussed what is project and team charters, who creates it, what is the difference in creators between project and team charter, why it is necessary to create and when it should be created, on what project or team stage it should be created. We also had a view at official project charter document, how it should like as a document, and also you can also provide it as a chart in order to visualize the information in a better way. So project charter should look like this way if you are using it officially on the project, but for creation you can use this format as a chart to visualize the information in a better way for participants. And in order to create these or this kind of documents, it just differs in formats, you can use World Cafe technique. It is the technique that will help you to have as an output this document. Also, you can use mind mapping technique to get the same kind of document. So techniques, facilitation techniques, help you to prepare the output documents. That is all about the content of the previous webinars. If you have any questions, please go ahead. I will wait for a couple of seconds. Okay, for now there is no questions, good. And we are going to templates for meeting design. So here is the template. Probably on one of the webinars you see something similar. So this is a template for facilitating release planning session. First of all, as an input for this session, you can have some release scope. Then you can use World Cafe technique when participants are discussing with one another the release scope details. And again, if you would like to find more about World Cafe technique itself, you should go, for instance, to this webinar, to the 6th webinar, and listen about the technique itself. So facilitation techniques is like rooms. It can be used for different activities. It can be used for different purposes. One and the same technique can be used, for instance, for charter creation and used for release planning. The same way as a room can be used for business training or for technical workshop or for some gamified activities. Some questions are coming. It is the question. So the recording of the last webinar can be found via LinkedIn. Yes, I haven't sent the recording to the last webinar via LinkedIn, but I will do it, I think, this week if the recording will be prepared, because it first should be converted and some other action should be made to it. People are saying that some links that I provided doesn't work. Okay, I will check all the links that I have provided, but again, please make sure that you are following LinkedIn links being not within Luxoft, because on some Luxoft areas LinkedIn is banned. So, but I will check all the links that I'm providing after the webinar and when I will be sharing you this presentation. Thank you for the feedback. So again, we're going back to the templates for meeting design. So release planning can have as an input release scope. Then we can do World Cafe technique over it and get a release backlog. Release backlog differs from release scope in a way that backlog is prioritized. So you do some prioritization over here. Then you use affinity estimation technique. You can find it over internet, how it is can be created, how it can be done, this affinity estimation technique, or it can be also seen in one of my previous webinars on team facilitation, but not in this series. And as an output, you will get then release plan with the dates, with the particular details. So it is like a containers that you put the activities in order to go from the output to from the input to the output. The next template can be used for facilitating iteration planning, like sprint planning, sprint as iteration. And again, as an input, you use capacity. Capacity is the quantity, is a number of hours available for the next sprint, for the next iteration. It is the hours without meetings, hours without vacations, days off, any other activity. It is clear hours of development of work. So you use capacity. You can use also velocity. Velocity is a historical number of story points done during the previous sprints. For instance, you have 3 sprints already left, and one of the sprint has a velocity of 30 story points, one of 40, and the third one of 35. So the general velocity for the sprints to plan will be 35 story points. So you use these both numbers, capacity in hours for the next sprints, and velocity is the historical number from previous sprints. It is your experience number. And you also use product requirements. Then you do planning poker, you're estimating, get iteration backlog when doing planning poker. You can also create critical paths, and as an output get iteration plan. Again, you can read about critical paths. There is lots of information about this technique, how to conduct it. It is useful to understand what minimum number of days or hours we should spend within a sprint doing the particular task set. It shows you very well the dependencies between tasks. So the next template is about facilitating retrospectives. Again, as an input for the meeting, you have previous retrospective improvements backlog. I saw lots of teams who forget to bring to the current retro the previous improvements list to check it, just to make sure that you conducted all the items from this list. So when you get it as an input, you go through it and make sure that you resolve your backlog items from the previous retro. Then you can play for the next retro, for the current retrospective items. You can use management 3.0 workout cards. It is represented over here. These cards are used within management 3.0 concept. This is cards that can be played on associations. We do it in the following ways in our teams. For instance, the team is sitting in a round and everybody got 3 cards, and one person put the card on a table in front of all people. For instance, it is a card with a lamp, and the person who is sitting next to this person, for instance, next right to the next right person, says some association about the previous sprint which is linked to the lamp symbol. For instance, he or she can say, During the previous sprint, we had lots of great ideas, but unfortunately we were not able to implement any of it. And put another card, for instance, the card of balloons. And again, the person next to this person who is putting the card is saying, well, we had a great team event last week. It was a real fun. And then he put the card with a book, and the person next to him can say, it was not very good to find out that we should provide some documentation to the software that we have already developed. It will be good if our business analysts clarify the requirements for our functionality beforehand, because this documentation creation took us additional time. So in such a way, you go 3 or 4 rounds till the people have the cards on their hands, and then the ideas, the improvements are summarized by a facilitator, and a list of improvements is created based on these associations. It helps people, this association game helps people to be more open to one another and to make suggestions in a more gamified way. And then when the list of improvements is created, you can do pro-con voting on this technique, on this list of improvements. And as a result, you will get a list of the action item from retrospective, where you define who do what action item till what time. I recommend you to provide here not it should be done for the current sprint, or should be done for the next sprint, or should be done for the 2 sprints ahead when you are answering the question when. But when should contain a particular date, for instance by July 20 or by August 10. It is better than to track these improvements. It is easier than to track these improvements. So the next template is about stand-ups. Again, when you're starting a stand-up, you can do a short warm-up. For instance, someone who came later to the whole team can say some joke, and then you are starting the ordinary ritual when everybody says what he or she did, what is going to do, and what impediments the person have. Then you as a team update burn down. You can do it all together. You can have your burn down on a wall, on a flip chart, and update it. Draw the line according to these answers to see where you are as a team. And then it is very important to investigate progress toward iteration goal, because what I saw sometimes is that people came to stand-ups, say 3 questions, and everybody go back to their work. The idea of stand-up, it is a sync-up, and the people, when they got all the information during the synchronization, they should do something about it. They should see where are they with their deliverables to the end of the sprint. Either will be in time with it, or they're already delaying. So that is the main idea of stand-up, to understand, are we delaying with our deliverables or not? And then the required adjustments, the required actions should be made. Probably the scoping is necessary. Probably you should put away some functionality, because you already in the middle of the sprint, you understand that something will be done during the end of the sprint. Here is all about designing of the meeting. You can create these templates by yourself using very different facilitation techniques from the previous webinars. So it is a containers for these techniques. And here is a summarizing matrix of facilitation techniques. Here is some activities that can be done during the opening of the meeting. You can choose the activities that you need, not to use all of them at once. So for instance, for some meetings, you can have opening speech. If it is a big town hall meeting, you can have opening speech, and then you can define meeting purpose, and then probably you provide some information about ground rules. You also point to some tools that you are going to use during the meeting, for instance, parking lot tool or AHA flip chart. So, and about the tools that can be used during the meeting, you can learn during our third webinar. So it is organized tools that can be used during meetings. And you can also say a few words about the agenda of the meeting. During the introduction part, you can have some warm-up. You can introduce participants to one another. Again, for instance, for some meeting during the opening, you can just remind people about ground rules. For instance, that everybody that is said in this room stays in this room, or that we should respect the speaker and only the one person is speaking during the session. So during the opening, you can only have this one rule, this one item as ground rules. And for instance, during introduction, you can have only warm-up, or you can check previous action items from the past meetings, or you can use all of it. During exploration information, you can have some presentation session. You can use mind mapping technique, world cover technique to explore the information that is provided. During evaluation information part of the meeting, you can use screening metrics, for instance. You can use pro-con analysis. And during decision, you can use consensus technique or majority technique or multi-voting technique or fist of five technique. And again, when you're closing the meeting, you can have QA question answering session. You can make a summary of the meeting that you had already conducted. For instance, if it is a long meeting, it took 4 or 5 hours. You can make a short summary. What was decided on this meeting? Who were participants of this meeting? What probably next items should be. You can also clean your parking lot during the closing part of the meeting, say thank you to the participants. And as a follow-up, follow-up part is done when the meeting is finalized, when the meeting is done and the participants go to their places. Then probably a facilitator of the meeting can prepare a meeting of the meeting, can make some knowledge sharing with the people who were not able to attend this meeting, and can also provide on daily or on weekly or monthly basis progress on the action items that were decided during this meeting. So it is metrics that you can use as the containers to create your own templates of this kind. Are there any questions about the templates or about the summarization matrix of facilitation techniques? Okay, and we are going to learning objectives that were covered and non-covered during this series of webinars. So here you can see the whole learning objectives of the training, of Agile Team Facilitation training. The objectives that are in green were covered by the webinars. So this objective, the Agile Team Facilitator, the main group, and its groups, Define an Agile Team Facilitator and Agile Team Facilitator, were covered during the webinar. So this whole item were covered during the webinar. Some questions are coming. Where it is possible to have a look at all techniques, description. The detailed descriptions of some techniques can be watched during the recordings of my webinars. And there are lots of descriptions of the techniques can be found. Let me see. Just a second. So here there is a webinar that is called How to Facilitate Scrum Events and Group Decisions. Yes, and it is the webinar that contains lots of details on facilitation techniques, on different facilitation techniques. So you will need to follow this link and watch this webinar. But again, the previous webinars from these sessions also contain their description of these techniques. that were provided in the facilitation metrics. So here again, back to the learning objectives. So the learning objectives that were covered during the webinars are marked in green, and if you have some discrepancies, if you have some different situation with your transcripts, you can write me in email. For instance, you can write me that I participated in these webinars and get the following attendance codes. Please provide the codes as well. But in my ICAgile transcript, there is a different situation. Probably there can be some issues with it, but write to me and we will solve it. For now, I think that during the webinars, I provided the codes to Agile Team Facilitation Mindset Learning Objectives, to Facilitation and Facilitator Stance Learning Objectives, Facilitation Meetings and Facilitating the Facilitator Stance Learning Objectives, Facilitating Collaboration, Setting the Facilitation Context, and Facilitating Chattered Activities. So, if you put the attendance codes on ICAgile site, you should have in your transcript, in your profile, all these learning objectives covered. If you participated in all webinars and got all 6 attendance codes, then you should have all these learning objectives covered. It is not possible to see the covered learning objectives internally at Luxoft Systems because we are working directly with ICAgile, and ICAgile is the organization who is providing the certificates to our participants. So it is necessary to go to ICAgile site and to see your transcript over there. And if there are any problems with it, please let me know. Please provide me a screenshot of your learning objectives from the ICAgile site, provide me the codes that you entered, and I will see what I can do to make sure that you get all these learning objectives covered. The information how to activate attendance codes were provided to you in my emails. There were a presentation about how to activate the attendance code on ICAgile site. I will look through your questions about learning objectives coverage after the webinar and write you my answers via email, because some questions about the learning objectives keep coming, but we will need to move a bit further. But I will answer your questions after the webinar personally in email. Past and upcoming webinars. So, here is the past webinars, the recordings to the webinars on facilitation. How to facilitate product backlog refinement session. It was not in this series of webinar, but it is also available. The recording of it is also available. How to facilitate meetings, Scrum events, and group discussions. It contains lots of descriptions to facilitation techniques and usage of facilitation techniques. So you can also have a recording of it. And during the current session of Agile Team Facilitation training, we had a webinar on Agile Team Facilitator Mindset and Behavior, Facilitation and Facilitator Stand, designing meetings for collaboration, and facilitating conversation and decision making. 2 more recordings and 2 more presentations of 2 more webinars should be provided to you, and I will do it during the current week. There is a question, will you share those links? Yes. The presentation and the recording of the current webinar will be shared to you within 10-12 days. I usually send email to all registered participants, so even if you are not present of the webinar, I am providing you the materials if you registered for the webinar. But again, as for attendance code, I don't provide it in recording to you. So the attendance code can be only received during the online sessions. But all the rest information will be provided to you. Also, there was a webinar on the visualization, on data visualization. What are the formats of visualization that can improve the data perception by the people? If you have, for instance, reports which are very difficult to read by the participants of the meeting, you can visualize this report. And here you have some information, can find some information how to do it. Probably, again, questions are coming about the webinars that were provided to you. I will answer it by email, but it can happen that you can miss some webinars. But again, these webinars that provided in the current session of webinars: Agile Team Facilitator Mindset and Behavior, Facilitation Facilitator Stance, Design and Methods for Collaboration, Facilitating Decision Makings, and two more webinars. Here it is: Facilitating Context and Facilitating Chattering Activities. The webinars with learning objectives will not be repeated in the meanwhile, but probably we will do the next session of webinars, but with the same attendance codes and with the same content, maybe somewhere in autumn. But I can't promise it to you, because after these webinars, we would like to focus on face-to-face trainings, because for now there are lots of Luxoft employees who got already covered half of the training with these learning objectives. And what you need to do next in order to get your certificate, if you're a Luxoft employee, if you participated in all webinars, you should write to me on this email that you would like to participate in face-to-face training on facilitation, on Agile Team Facilitation. Then I will put you in preliminary list of participants. And after this, when in your location we have at least 10 people, some of our trainers, for instance me or one of my team members, come to this location and conduct the rest of the learning objectives from this training. We need to do it face-to-face because there are lots of practical activities that you should know how it can be done, how it should be done on practice in group. So if you would like to have a certificate, if you would like to get a certificate for Agile Team Facilitation by ICAgile, you should write to me and make a request that you would like to be a participant of this training. It is about Luxoft employees. As for non-Luxoft employees, you should participate in full-time training of 2 days that will take place, I think, somewhere in autumn. It will be October or November. But during this training, you will go again through all the learning objectives, and after this, you will be able to get the certificate of ICAgile. So for non-Luxoft employees, these webinars provide an opportunity to see the level of materials that will be provided during the training, and to get some visibility on the topic, whether it is interested to you or not interested. But for Luxoft employees, there is a great possibility to get the certificate. Some people are asking, if I didn't participate in all the webinars, is there a chance to participate in face-to-face training? Yes, there is such possibility. We will provide a test to all people who participated partially or who participated in all webinars, to make sure that they got all the knowledge from the webinars. So if you participated only in half of webinars, you can write me the request. Then when the group is formed, I will prepare the test to all the participants, and I will prepare, and again, this recording already exists of all the webinars. So you listen recordings of the webinars, explore the presentations, pass the test, and after this, you're available to participate in face-to-face training. So it can work if you participated online only in the part of the webinars. You still have a chance to participate in face-to-face training. Okay. If some people didn't participate previously, again in some webinars or in some trainings of ICAgile conducted by Luxoft Practice, you again can write to me in what webinars you already participated, and you can also request your participation in face-to-face training with me, and I will provide you the test. If you pass the test, you go to face-to-face training. And again, if the group is formed in your location. But for instance, if you're from Krakow and we have a training in Wrocław, maybe you will have a chance to come from Krakow to Wrocław. So, what is going to be next in webinars that I'm going to conduct? In August, I'm going to conduct 2 webinars. First of all, it is Facilitation Fundamentals. It doesn't provide you any attendance codes, but it is a very fundamental information about facilitation. Why I'm conducting it? Because during the current session of webinars, I'm still getting very fundamental questions about, and very theoretical and general questions about facilitation on the one hand, and I am getting questions about practical usage of the facilitation techniques. So I'm going to make a webinar where I will describe what is facilitation, why it is necessary, who is facilitator, and the difference between facilitator and agile facilitator. Also, I'm going to provide 1 or 2 techniques for information gathering on practical experience, for information exploration on practice, for information evaluation on practice. So the technique and its usage. And also, since there are lots of questions about conflict resolution, I will provide some hints, some tips how to resolve the conflicts within the framework of group dynamic. Framework of group dynamic, it is a framework by Bruce Tuckman. I'm just going to remind it to you. Here it is. It is about forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. And on each of this stage, we can have some conflicts, and there is some tips, some hints how it can be resolved on each particular phase. So here is the webinar that I'm going to provide somewhere at the beginning of the August. Facilitation Fundamentals. Again, follow me on LinkedIn to make sure you will get announcement about this event, and also read the announcements from Luxoft Training Center, because they're also going to send this announcement to Luxoft employees. What else I'm going to do in August is to conduct a training on Scrum basics. It does nothing with facilitation, but it describes the relation between Scrum and Agile, because sometimes I hear that people are talking about Agile, but it is actually they mean Scrum, and people mean Scrum but talking about Agile. So there is some misconceptions over there, and I'm going to clarify it. Also, during this webinar, I will provide information about Scrum main principles, roles and responsibilities, Scrum events, Scrum artifacts, and Scrum metrics. So again, it will be Scrum basics, overview of Scrum framework. But probably even if you're using Scrum on your project already, you will get interesting information over there, because I'm conducting and I'm set up in Scrum on different teams, and there are lots of questions and lots of clarifications over Scrum events, how it should be conducted, what it's about, what are Scrum artifacts, because some people think that Scrum artifacts are definition of ready, for instance, or it is a Scrum board, which is actually a Kanban board that we're using on our Scrum project. It is not Scrum artifacts. What Scrum metrics are used on Scrum projects? So if you're interested, again, follow me and listen to this webinar in August. Apart from webinars, there are also different trainings, and apart from Agile Team Facilitation training that Luxoft Agile Practice conducts. There are Agile Fundamentals training. All these trainings are of 2 days. Agile Fundamentals, Business Value Analysis training for business analysts, for people who are dealing with requirements, who are dealing with products, for people who would like to make sure that they really bring in value to the business users. Again, training on facilitation. I think you know lots about it now. And training on Scrum Master. It is a professional Scrum Master training by Scrum.org. And we are also now have a trainer who conducts this training. And you can get the certificate of professional Scrum Master. Also, I am making lots of custom workshops without any certification. It is just a workshop to learn coaching and self-coaching technique, agile project management style, agile project metrics, motivation model, feedback gathering models, and etc. But as for certification, we have now 4 trainings. And if you would like to participate in these trainings, if you're from Luxoft or not from Luxoft, you can write to me, but you should write to me the name of the training that you would like to participate in and your location. So you will get the materials of this webinar within 10, 20, 12 days. You will get presentation, video, and instruction how to activate attendance code, but for this training you will not have it because this slide is from my previous presentations. For previous presentations you got already this instruction how to activate your attendance code on ICAgile. Now I will answer the questions. If some new questions will come, if you have any, please don't hesitate and write it to me. I will leave the session for 5 minutes more in order you provide me your feedback, because I'm reading your feedback in questions during the webinar session, and I'm also reading your feedback in feedback form that you are asked to fill in while you're leaving the webinar. Thank you all of you for attending this session. It was great, and I'm looking forward to see you on my next webinars in August. Have a good time, have a good day. Goodbye.